From the newsroom. The power table. This Tuesday, October 21st, here at the power table from the reaction of the 3rd, we are with two deputies who are running for re-election, Diego Schalper, who is running for District 10. Deputy Schalper, how are you? Good morning. Thank you for being here at the power table of the reaction of the 3rd. Hello, Rodrigo. Good morning. May we have a great debate here with my friend Gonzalo Winter. Gonzalo Winter, whom we have already introduced, is running for re-election for the district. That's
right.
11, no, 10 and 11. 10, adjacent to 11.
Sure, 10 and 11.
In fact, right now we are on the border between 10 and 11. Sure, we are effectively at the point between 10 and 11. We are going to talk about borders, migration, so many things that we have on the table, but I want to start.
Between Providencia and Los Condes.
Between Providencia and Los Condes. I want to start, deputies, with an event that occurred yesterday, known yesterday there in the commune of Recoleta, the death of an 11-year-old minor who left school in the morning and was returning home in his school van. He was hit by a private car driven by criminals, who were followed by another character, a character. Yes, I will tell you more details about that story, but unfortunately he died. And today the process of formalizing these people was underway. But by the way, a situation of criticism has been generated at a cross-cutting level. The presidential candidates themselves have also spoken about this. How do you deal with these types of situations? How do you deal with a situation like this, Deputy Inter?
No, first I would like to express my condolences to the family. The truth is that I can't think of anything more heartbreaking than knowing that your child who goes to school has lost his life in these circumstances. So I want to send my condolences to the family and to all of Chilean society, because I believe that when a child dies like this, all of us have lost a member of our community. Now, the pain of the parents is something that no one here can try to emphasize because I believe that each one of us can close our eyes, think about our child. And what happens to our body is indescribable. Obviously, I believe that we have been sharing a diagnosis for a long time. Chile has a very serious security crisis with a state that was not prepared in its intelligence capabilities, laws, police infrastructure, or police personnel. And these are points on which, beyond the paraphernalia that one can find in the debates, agreements have been reached for quite some time. That is why, for example, the legislative backlog that we had today has 72 laws, 70 new laws that we have not agreed on all of because we are talking about 70 laws that have many articles, but let's say that we have agreed on 85 to 90%. Yeah. Obviously, that is not yet felt today because these are laws that begin to be implemented after they are enacted, etc. We have also had, I would say, an increase, depending on how you measure it, of 15% of the national budget that is allocated to security. Precisely because of these types of things. Now what remains for us to discuss is the criminal responsibility of minors, the recidivism in this case, and another aspect that I would also like to bring up, the ease with which police and even military supplies can be purchased on the market. If you go to the promenade, it is full
of people, and that is due to the person, because they are different things. That is why I am talking about recidivism. And finally, I want to once again express my position against weapons in the hands of civilians. I believe that if we arm people like this or make it easier for them to buy weapons, this situation would be much more serious. Why? Because a shooting would be carried out by a person who is not as trained as the Carabineros de Chile for a shooting. Yeah. And finally, I know I went on and on with my answer. Hey, there are neighborhoods in Chile, and there are neighborhoods in my district, and I don't want to name them because I don't want to stigmatize them, where there are blocks where the rule of law does not prevail. It's a scandal that I say this, but it's the truth and everyone knows it, and this has been the case for decades. Otherwise, there's a person, the drug trafficker or the leader of the organized crime of the block, who rules that block. If the people of that block arm themselves, or of that neighborhood or that commune, I know that the weapons will end up in the hands of that man, which is much more serious. I want more weapons.
But in the hands of the Carabineros, I
don't think it's a scandal, as you say. I think it's serious that the rule of law does not prevail in some communes of the metropolitan area. That's true. Yes, Congressman Schalper. Hey, I'll start with the first thing and then we'll focus a bit on what the congressman said. Greetings to the auditors. In their case, obviously the first thing is to send our condolences to the families who have suffered this death. Those of us who are parents, this really moves us. The second thing is, obviously, I imagine that those at home feel the same indignation that one feels when one sees that a diagnosis of crisis that has been in place for quite some time has not been confronted with enough force. Because let's be honest, unfortunately, certain consensuses that today seem like common sense were not so common sense a few years ago. Laws that some people boast about having approved or supported today, not long ago they voted against them, and what they did was delay us too much in moving forward with a legislative agenda that we should have already implemented. And I tell the auditors at home that this continues like this, that is, we still have not reached a consensus on, for example, toughening penalties for minors or classifying illegal entry into the country as a crime. I have submitted a bill regarding the crime that unfortunately motivated yesterday's unfortunate event, which seeks to toughen penalties for cell phone theft, but we do not have such a broad consensus either. So, I am glad that today the diagnoses have progressed in levels of support, but I hope that in the future government, when the current ruling party moves to the opposition, it will not experience something like a second wind of what we experienced in the previous government, right? That these bills were not approved with sufficient rigor. Secondly, I have to confess my disappointment when I learned about the makeup of the Ministry of Security. I was one of those who gambled from the opposition so that we would get this done with the conviction that in the Ministry of Security we were going to have technical staff of top-level people dedicated to police management. And unfortunately, what we have seen is that there have been few people who have filled those positions, not many technicians and even fewer experts in police management. So, here's an issue, Rodrigo, about police management, about assessing criminological phenomena, anticipating certain things, and therefore, I hope that we're all aware that what's needed going forward is a Ministry of Security, and also at the level. Look, I was just talking to Mayor Alexandria a couple of hours ago. How do we also empower municipal management to combat crime? How do we work together between the police, the Undersecretary for Crime Prevention, and the municipalities? I mean, here I think Chileans are tired of diagnoses and of us, let's say, being impressed by the facts without taking responsibility for them. And here we have to consider the legislative agenda. I hope that in the months remaining for this government, we'll be able to get some of the bills that we need to get through. But it's very important for people who are at home. This is about police management, and police management requires competent people in the decision-making spaces. I am interested in addressing juvenile criminal responsibility and also the carrying of weapons, as Deputy Winter said. But before that, let's see how to put it. We need to evaluate a ministry that has been in operation for 5 months. That's fair, absolutely. Our role is always to evaluate. The thing is that this evaluation has to be fair, and it has to include the fact that it has been in operation for 5 months.
And what is your assessment of the Ministry of Security?
That it is a process of installation in accordance with the law, and obviously setting up a ministry is somewhat slow. But I want to make a distinction here with respect to what Deputy Schalper is proposing. I think that sometimes there are convenient rhetorical excesses, such as, for example, when the newspaper shows the minister's office, which is a strictly political job, and says, look, these people are politicians, because they are not people who are police technicians, they are not experts in police intelligence, etc. No, the minister's office does indeed have to carry out political tasks, because the task of being a minister is a political task. And this is a very controversial issue, but it is good for the country to know, as a civic education, that the Minister of Health does not have to operate on human bodies, he has to pass laws, he has to administer the system, he has to carry out reforms, which is a political task, of budget, of legislation, of gathering votes, etc. And that is why I also believe that one of the problems that I see in Chile is that many times our adversaries, as Congressman Schalper has criticized us for certain things, our adversaries do two things that harm the country. One is to use anti-crime rhetoric that stirs up passions because crime is very painful. In other words, the fear of being at home is very infuriating. The fear of losing your child is outrageous, and instead of proposing solutions and rational discussions, that fear is only stirred up and that agitation is carried over to legislative debate. That delays projects. When they include, for example, a Republican in the rules on the use of force, they included an article that alluded to the disdain for Carabineros when they deliberately point it in the eyes of protesters. What's the point of including that article? It only delays the debate. Okay, now, what caused that delay in the debate? You agree with Congressman Schalper when he says, indeed, there were some bills that could have come out earlier, which could have blocked certain things. What happens is that when they include things like that, they cause rhetorical excesses that lead us to debates whose objective is to be able to say, look, the left is against fighting crime. And what I believe, and I'm stating it here, I'm always going to say it, is that every human institution and every state institution must have powers and must have limits on those powers, the deputies and also the Carabineros. And I think that one of the things that the right does wrong and that harms the debate is that the Carabineros is an institution that has close to 59,000 employees, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, there has to be a rational discussion about its organization and efficiency, like any human institution. I imagine that here at COPESA, they have to have discussions all the time about how to best organize the company. The Chamber of Deputies is the same. I think that Congressman Schalper's team, how many people does it have? I imagine between 5 and 10. I imagine that you, Congressman Schalper, are always thinking, I could give this person this job, this person isn't doing it well, this person is doing it very well, they should get some kind of award, etc. But the Carabineros are never discussed. Why? Because the right has turned the Carabineros into a sacred object instead of a state institution. And I think that's not good for us. Congressman Schalper.
Yes, several things. Hey, first of all, I am part of that right wing that has presented more than 30 bills, which makes me very proud. Among them, the 9 Redamal law, which is the one that returned the use of force to our police. By the way, I am very happy to legislate. 22 articles, I voted against one.
You took the anti-allergic that day. By the way, the entire minister, but look, it's fine. But what I want to tell you is the following. I think we have to be aware that when things are not approved on time, there is a cost. Here I will give you a name and surname. Congressman Brito, as president of the Defense Committee, did everything he could to hinder the intelligence law. Everything he could, because he delayed it for at least 2 years in the last period, and today, of course, we still have not been able to approve the intelligence law. So, what do I say? How can we make the security infrastructure or ecosystem work better? First of all, from the point of view of municipal security, we have a grotesque discussion about not wanting to provide municipal officials with non-lethal weapons, or at least some of them. Did you like that bill? I am in favor of non-lethal weapons. I have presented a bill, Rodrigo, a sentence. I have a position that has limits. I have presented a bill to make the use of electric guns possible even for certain private security guards who are trained. Why not? So, the first major issue, municipal security. Second, the police. You are in favor of municipal security and private security guards with weapons, not certain ones with a special specificity, which is private security guards who have specific training. Second, everything that has to do with the police. We will be aware at home, regarding what Deputy Inter was just saying, about not sacralizing the police force because of the poor pay conditions that our police officers have. Especially considering those in the metropolitan region. You know that those in the metropolitan region, who are usually the ones who are most at risk, do not have, for example, the additional subsidy for the area that some who are in very respectable situations have, but who do not have it in Santiago. Listen, and another thing that is super important. Here are small but important things that we have to address. How do we improve police personnel in the communes where there is an increase in crime? How do we improve the response capacity in terms of remote surveillance? In other words, a series of things. And last but not least, regarding the Ministry of Security, we were the authors of a series of indications that required suitability criteria for those who work in the Ministry of Security. I'm not talking about the minister's office, I'm talking about the regional and security authorities, I'm talking about the people in charge of criminal analysis, I'm talking about the people in charge of prosecuting crimes. I believe that it is not possible to improve police management if we do not have competent people. And I have said this to Minister Cordero with the utmost respect. I think they were not able to understand that here we had to give a signal of having truly competent people in the future government. I have no doubt that what we are going to do is have competent people in the prosecution of crimes, because the indicators will not improve, Rodrigo, if you do not improve the infantry, regardless of
who wins the elections. Regardless of who wins the elections. In other
words, it gives the impression that, fortunately, someone from the opposition is going to win. I can add a few things. Yes, when I only had one question to answer because you had already said it, there are communes, there are neighborhoods in the metropolitan region that do not govern by the rule of law, but completely. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing that Gonzalo did. I'm not going to mention them, but look, I'm going to tell you a secret that I met with the prefect of the Eastern Metropolitan Region in charge of the PDI on Friday, and there we saw which are the hot zones of that prefecture. And there are hot zones, because hotspot is the expression where certain crimes are concentrated, the concentration of micro-trafficking, the concentration of employment of minors committing crimes, cell phone theft. And I'll take this opportunity to pass the message to Congresswoman Javiera Morales, who hopefully will put the bill on the table against cell phone theft that she has presented, which seeks to cut the chain of cell phone theft because, so that everyone at home knows, it is an easy source of money to fuel drug trafficking. Recolles starts right by the river, and with this I'll end a short sentence. I believe that we need to professionalize police management, and in that regard, at least from Parliament, if I am re-elected, I will work hard to ensure that the Security Committee oversees. I want to clarify some things that have been said. First, I am in favor of using lethal brothers, but I believe that training protocols must be established, etc. That's right, because you are talking about private guards and also municipal security. I am not talking about civilians, but municipal guards with a municipal security law governing clear protocols. Yes, of course, but they will be governed by this law, etc. But why? Because one thing we saw during the outbreak is that when the police were asked what the rubber bullets were, they did not even have information, not even about the material, not even about their lethality. They could not say whether they were more or less lethal because they had no studies. So, I am in favor of that being done, but it should be done professionally. Secondly, when I say that the sacralization of the police prevents a serious debate about the police, these are just things that the police have told me. For example, in municipalities where there is less risk of crime, there are a certain number of police officers who do not meet police criteria, but rather meet criteria that who knows what they are, things that the police have told me. On the subject of remuneration, many people agree on this. Absolutely. Chile needs more police personnel and better conditions. To give dignity to police work and dignity, I mean salary, I mean benefits, I mean allocation by area, all that, the police have told me all that, but it is difficult to discuss the police. For example, the issue, which has been discussed a lot, and I believe that a diagnosis is already being established, which is the amount of administrative tasks that the police have and the lack of transparency in the criteria with which one is on the street and another is on administrative duty. That is what the police have told me. It's no longer like I'm against that's just the way it is. What's the
point?
Indeed, there are a large number of civil servants who are doing administrative work, but there is general agreement on that has already become a common diagnosis.
But there are worse things than that, but I'm missing, sorry, two things that I want to say that are super important. I have a bill that was approved in the Chamber of Deputies without the vote of Chile Vamos and Republicans, but it achieved a majority, with centrist parties, etc., which is very important for my district and which is in the Senate and which the right did not support and I never understood why. Which one? The one about telephone calls.
Right, the one about houses on the land. In Santiago there are many vacant lots, many houses, etc., that are abandoned by their owners. For example, neighborhoods like the Yungay neighborhood, where there are very long-standing owners and which become real establishments of crime. What happens, since the owner has abandoned it, which is a law that has existed since 2003? The municipality, unless they are caught red-handed, cannot evict the person because they are not the owner, even though all the neighbors know that this is a drug den. Now, what I am proposing and which was approved in the Chamber of Deputies is that if it is proven that the house causes a security problem and the owners do not appear, the municipality can subrogate the owner in the eviction and also in occupying the property for other tasks, for example, turning it into a security guard, and the right wing votes against it because they consider that private property makes them anxious. Okay. And finally, I want to buy cell phones, but if I pay a sum of money it looks like real estate or because it is real estate because the owner was missing. When the owner returns.
When the owner cannot be found.
When the owner returns, he pays some fines and gets his property back. If it is his. Okay, the issue is that while it is missing and there are people who sell drugs and go out and everyone knows that the people who are armed come out of there, the state can intervene and not just evict them, because the problem we have today is that people evict and come back the next day. So, and the worst thing is that the law establishes a measure that is a perimeter fence, which is basically a plastic tape that says no trespassing. So, we say, no, let the guards, let the municipal inspectors occupy that building, let them turn it into a security station. Quote, right? And the last thing, the theft of cell phones. That is an issue that politics has not addressed as it should. When a gunman steals your cell phone on the bus, where does that cell phone go? I don't know if you have seen that in the big cities of Chile there are many places that are computer stores, but they only sell wholesale and they do not serve people. What are those places? Where do the stolen cell phones end up in Chile? In Chile, the number of cell phones stolen each year is impressive. I don't know if I believe there is a figure that is several 100,000.
Cell phones stolen each year. It's hundreds of thousands, right? Yes, it's hundreds of thousands. It's hundreds of thousands. Where?
Taking into account the number of cell phones that there are in this country as well.
Yes, of course there is more than one per person. Of course.
Where do they end up? Who sells them? So there needs to be supervision. I think in all those places that do not serve the public and only sell cell phones. Something I want to go into is carrying weapons, which is also of great interest to me. I am glad to hear Gonzalo today in a different format than we heard him before. You will recall that at the beginning of this government, the Minister of Women's Affairs, for the time being, gave a very bad rating and the minister was a police officer who was basically doing his job. So I'm glad that that has improved, and that's why I believe that's part of what the minister said. Improved, you said, the view they had of the Carabineros when Minister Toa said they were allergic to public order is what we witnessed in the votes of the Security Committee, in the votes in the chamber. Regarding the Carabineros, this government promised to pay them the risk bonus and paid it quite late, and they promised to pay them the equivalent of the PMG, that is, a quarterly bonus that they still haven't paid. Excuse me, I listen to you with super high, almost Franciscan patience. You want to go there. All the new infrastructure that the Carabineros has was implemented in this government and not in the previous one. So we're going to do it because you had an opposition that wouldn't put a spoke in your wheel. And regarding cell phone theft, this is very important to understand. Cell phone theft today carries a very low penalty and it also has another problem. What we have presented as a bill is that the mere fact of formalizing the complaint, within 48 hours the court will order the blocking of the IMEI and the blocking of the IMSI. What would that be? What does that mean in your case? The blocking of the device, because nowadays what is done is that the line is blocked many times, but in practice that does not translate into anything because that cell phone is resold, a new line is opened, a prepaid card is purchased and things continue. So what we are talking about here, and at least I want to embody this right wing, is a right wing that provides solutions through bills, because it does not just stop at diagnoses. And regarding what Gonzalo was saying, the bill also incorporates a tougher penalty for receiving stolen goods, which is basically when you sell something stolen, and also redress for those businesses that obtain stolen cell phones and sell them as part of their inventory. So that's
the key, because when they silence you, it's
logical. When you increase the sentence for the guy in the whole chain, you have to increase it by
14 or 25 years, it doesn't matter, and sometimes even less, a deputy, 12 years, of course. And who goes through life like that? Gonz doesn't. Read the official newspaper to find out if he was given the sentence. So, the increase in the crime of receiving stolen goods, and I don't know how you voted for it, but we presented a bill to toughen the sentences for minors, so that those who suffer. The point is that it has no effect. On the contrary, the second part of your bill has effect and we congratulate it. A bill in law to toughen the sentences for minors. You know that in Chile when a minor is sentenced as a minor, it does not constitute recidivism when they are of legal age, which is unacceptable. Do
you agree with that? No, they didn't vote against it. And they voted against it because they confuse, and with this I conclude, the protection of children's rights with the belief that this has anything to do with being soft on minors who commit crimes, especially when organized crime gangs use minors. What we started talking about was that the rule of law does not exist in certain neighborhoods, where many children also work, and I want to be very clear about something. First, the increase in the crime of receiving stolen goods and selling stolen cell phones. I think that is important because those are organized crime gangs and organized crime gangs do have rationality. Unlike the guy who was out of school,
rolling cell phones on the bus, who if you increase his sentence it doesn't have much effect because he acts under the logic that they won't catch him or that if they do catch him he'll go to jail and that even in his mentality.
And this that we have talked about with gendarmes, I don't know, in his mentality it can even be positive because it increases his status in the neighborhood and in the society, the micro-society in which he operates. On the contrary, the gang, the company that exports stolen cell phones, which does exist, must be hit hard. Now, there is an issue that I was questioning that project. What? The bill that toughened penalties for minors, which is in its second reading in the Senate, which we approved in the chamber. I understand with a vote against, I don't know if yours in particular, but at least the Communist Party and the Broad Front, in any case, against. I'm not clear on what that is at the moment, but I do want to say one thing. That there is a problem as a society. Minors, who are the spearhead of an organized crime gang, are antisocial because they commit crimes and those crimes must be eradicated and we must act harshly. But they are also children who are being abused by that criminal gang. They are also children who could be in school. So, the idea of turning them into a lost cause and drying them up in jail does not really appeal to me and I think the state has to invest. Now, I want to be very clear about something. It's not a matter of the courts or the penalty. I think the state should invest a lot of money in going to fight for that child. With the organized crime gang. Why? To show affection. Some say that it takes longer. Congressman, sorry, money.
Sorry, and look, I'm part of the group for reintegration that Congressman Oliveira invited us to, and I'd like to thank her for that. And the ground zero of any reintegration process is to be aware that a mistake has been made here and that the mistake must be punished. In other words, if you intend to reintegrate someone without making it clear that whoever does it pays, we have a structural problem. So, what do we say? Today we have a problem in which minors feel that they are going unpunished. Look, I'm going to tell you something, and this, perhaps, so that the auditor at home knows, we as an office have legal representation, not directly because I cannot constitutionally, but of certain victims of some riots, another bill that I have presented, were often committed by minors, because
taking advantage of impunity, the real headhunters of drugs and drug trafficking use minors to commit these crimes, to steal cars, to steal high-end goods and then use the money. So, what do I want to tell you? If we don't address this, Rodrigo, the truth is that it is completely out of context. There are two very short issues. Deputy Schalper, Deputy Winter. Are you willing to approve or support a short law to correct the increase in electricity rates and have it be done before January, as is forecast?
in other words, we would have to do that this afternoon. It is very serious. In fact, we presented a bill, led by Congressman Javier Morales, to demand the return of unjustified increases. Hey, but I had a question. There's one thing I have to say, right? This government has taken charge of all the institutional and infrastructure shortcomings of the Carabineros, because the Carabineros don't fight crime with applause and congratulations. They fight it with helmets, bulletproof vests, and armored cars. And what I'm saying, the first part of my sentence isn't mine, it's a sentence from Ricardo Yanez. So this idea that I think I've
made is to thank him for supporting my candidacy in District 11. No, that's fine, that's fine. If I don't get into Ricardo Yanez's political opinions, what I do get into is that I've seen a lot of right-wing people during my political career, right? Diego's case, Diego chairs bills, he throws slaps at the Carabineros, he makes speeches about the Carabineros, there are even some candidates who use the Carabineros shield as their campaign logo, etc.
But this government put in place bumper cars, security systems, laws, vests, so yes, it will cut short the law to continue moving forward. Tomorrow it will cut short the law too. Hey, this president, I hope we have meetings today. President Boric said on national television
that Chile had its house in order and its accounts clear. We haven't realized that even the electricity bills are clear, because what can I say about the budget accounts? Those are not clear. So, I call on the government, which has the initiative in these matters, to come up with a way out of the disaster that Minister Pardo has caused and to tell us what we are going to do, because I, obviously, am going to support all the cuts that repair the damage they have caused, but so that people at home know, since these are tariff issues, they are the exclusive initiative of the government. Gonzalo and I can present whatever we want, but we have no initiative in this. So, President Boric, since your government hasn't made the electricity bills clear, at least there's no way to invite people to dialogue. No, so that they can at least clarify the electricity bills. Speaking of clarification, you're in favor of clarifying and making it transparent. How much will Michel Bachal's campaign financing cost? That's
another issue that's not clear. If public spending is public spending, we must also understand that in international matters there are certain reservations that, are strategic issues. No, don't laugh, Congressman Chell, but you understand this. You weren't a professor of constitutional law. That's
the government's argument. Do you think it's correct? I can have the professor of No. What I want is to have the professor of constitutional law sitting at the table, and when we say that in international matters, like in matters of armed forces, there are strategic issues.
I would say that everyone understands that.
Yes, what happens is that, let's see, Minister Vallejo told me yesterday, because she challenged me, that I was trying to undermine President Chile's candidacy. I would tell the minister to either undermine her by using her. No, but look, no, don't worry, but look, I would tell you the following. This government has had spectacular talent for leaving the possibility of this candidacy at almost zero, because first, it failed to achieve a cross-party consensus in the country of origin, second, it was not able to design a reasonable strategy, and the icing on the cake is that it expects Chileans not to know how much this issue is going to cost us. I mean, it seems incredible to me. I mean, look, think about it. Article 8 of our Constitution, regarding the illusion of my colleague, the principle of transparency and probity, evidently requires that the expenses of something like this be transparent. In other words, the expenses of the organized crime strategy are transparent, the strategy, whether you are in favor or against this candidacy. What I believe, Gonzalo, calm down, no, don't get agitated. Look, I'm answering your question and then I'll answer the second interviewer's question.
He's not going to answer it. Yes, I'm going to answer it anyway. Look, let's see.
Regarding the clarity of the accounts, it's clear that this government has to be honest about how much President Bachelet's adventure is going to cost Chile. And secondly, what we want to know is what the political proposal is, because they tell us, look, support her because she's national. It would be like me telling Congressman Winter to support Congressman Schalper at the UN because he is with Nacional. I assure you that he would not be so willing to do something like that.
But then, what
happens is that in the end, What there is a political project. So, what do I want to say? I'll end with this. The government has a duty to tell Chileans how much President Bachel's candidacy is going to cost us, not only in direct expenses, but also in the man-hours of the Chancellery, to the detriment of promoting tourism, promoting international agreements and things that I believe are more important. It was clear to me whether she is for or against it. The truth is that I'm waiting for her to tell us what the political proposal is. I do not believe that if they proposed Jose Antonio Cast for UN Secretary General, for example, because it is with Nacional, I would be against it. I have no problem saying that, and they propose Michelle Bachel, I'm in favor.
But I would have liked it, Gonzalo, and I'm telling you this, so you can understand my positions clearly. Gonzalo, I'll tell you the following. Well,
one sentence, well, look. Do you know what this government should have done? They did it wrong. They should have called the foreign relations committees. They should have presented us with this plan. They should have told us how much it was going to cost and garnered support. But since it's a rabbit that the president pulled out in the assembly to try to get out of trouble, this has clearly not been done well. They
should have verbalized it. The government should have verbalized it with the presidential candidates. The thing is that, with Jose Antonio Cast.
Antonio Cast has never reached an agreement with anyone in his life, not even with the UD bench when he was a deputy. No, I don't think that's the case. Congressman Gonzalo Winter, who is running for re-election in District 11. If Diego wants to defend Jose Antonio Cast's capacity for dialogue, it seems to me, and Congressman Diego Schalper here at the table of power, since the reaction of the I am fair in not using caricatures. Thank you, Congressman.